So I guess we will start it off with introductions. Do we have anybody on the phone?
No.
No.
Introductions. And we'll start, I'm Jan, Administrator for Special Districts.
Kevin Murphy, General Manager for Calgary Water.
Oh, I'm Rose. Do I have a spot?
Yeah.
I
you
do?
gotta find yours.
I have to find
No.
a spot.
She doesn't.
I don't have a spot. I can say I know my
Springs.
name. I'm Rose Medicine and I'm Anderson Springs CSD.
Meryl? Muriel.
We're introducing.
Introducing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Muriel Madrano, Anderson Springs.
Bill Kane with Calpine.
Dylan Escobar, NCPA.
Daniel Matthews, Harris, Calpine.
Ed Vogt with Reservoir Engineer with NCPA.
And Craig Hartline, Geophysicist for Calpine.
And Joan.
Joan Clark. Who's never late?
So did everybody have a chance to look at the minutes, and are there any changes, corrections, or additions? And if not, anybody want to move to?
I did see a mistake in the CSD. It's called Fiora, right?
Yeah, it's
Not Sierra.
Any other corrections? Can we approve them with the corrections suggested?
I'll make a motion to approve this minute.
I'm assuming somebody will second it.
I think just your committee is right here, right?
Second.
We'll move right into Ed Road, Southeast Edge Pipeline operation.
Turn the lights down, it's okay.
Jan mentioned, my name's Ed Vogt. I'm the Reservoir Engineer for NCPA. Typically, the way the meeting goes is we give a general overview of our pipeline operations and the seismic activity that we see at the geysers. And then Craig launches into more of an in-depth discussion on the seismic activity. So just view this as more or less an overview. There's a report back there which my colleague Dylan helped pull together. He discusses everything that's on the slides here, so feel free to grab a copy. The reporting period we're talking about goes from April 1st through September 30th of this year. This is the historical delivery of the SEGEP pipeline, Southeast Geysers Effluent Pipeline for water delivered to us going back since its inception in September of 1997. So on average, we've delivered, well, total delivery to the geysers during that entire period of time has been about 60.25 billion gallons. Our average injection rate of that water is around 5,200 gallons per minute. That's water that we split between us and Calpine. Typically, we take about 40% of that volume, and Calpine gets about 60% of the volume. So on average, about 5,200 gallons per minute is what's being delivered from Lake County to the geysers. Just reporting period we're talking about here, again, April 1st through the end of September. This is the SEGEP delivery, millions of gallons per day from 0 to 10 on the y-axis. And the red line represents how much we've actually delivered during that period of time. For the most part, it's just under 9 million gallons per day of water being delivered. We did have a period of time in the summer from about late August through October, where we were down on our deliveries. We had a drilling activity, we had a drilling rig going on our lease during that period of time. They required fresh water, so we had to cut back on the effluent deliveries and went on a two-stream operation. So on average, our daily average injection during that period of time was about 4,671 gallons per minute, down a little bit from our historical average. The availability of the pipeline is roughly about 90% during that period of time. It was operating 90% of the period of time. Seismic activity, again, on the wax from 0 to 200, the number of seismic activity, seismic events, magnitude 1.5 and above. You can see the historical numbers going through the whole thing. To date, through September for 2019, we hit about 71 seismic events. So we're down a little bit. And this is just in the southeast geysers portion of the field, not the entire field. We're down a little bit from where we were last year. I think if you project out another 3 months, we might be up closer to 100, but we'll probably be down a little bit in terms of historical average for this year. Figure 4, just within the southeast geysers, we're showing about 36 events, magnitude, 36 events, magnitude 1.5 and above. There were no events above magnitude 3 on this. I'm sure Craig will elaborate a little bit more on this one. You can see the radial distance from Anderson Springs. This next one, well, one of the other ones shows it from Middletown, gives you a better feel for it. Steam production and injection in the southeast geysers. This is us and Calpine combined. The blue bars represent where the wax is mass of steam or water, billions of pounds mass, pounds mass. The blue bars represent steam production, the red bars represent water injection. So you can see this last year, at least in the last 6 months, April through September, we produced about 17 billion pounds of steam, and we've injected about 10.58 billion pounds of water. So that's roughly about 62%, I think, mass replacement for the year. So if you look at it historically for the geysers, at least on our lease, NCPA's lease, we've replaced about 2/3, 66% mass replacement on the lease historically. So this year we're down a little bit more than what we would normally do. The geysers as a whole, the entire geysers, not just the southeast portion of it. This graph shows the seismic activity historically going back to 2010. Number of events magnitude 1.5 and above from 0 to 1,400 on the Y scale. You can see that earlier for 2010 to 2013, the number of events was steadily climbing. Since that time, they've come down substantially. Right now, in 2019, we have about 727 events in the entire geysers, magnitude 1.5 and above. And that's about average for what it looks like for the last 3-4 years. This is the overall geysers, again for that same period, April 1st through September. This shows the location of all the events that occurred. The ones magnitude 3 and above are all highlighted in red, showing the numbers. I believe there were 8 events, is that right? That were magnitude 3 and above. Most of them were in the northwest portion of the geysers, outside of the study area. And you can see where Middletown is in relation to Anderson Springs and all the other segments. And then finally, just to summarize, again, this is just a brief overview. The SAGUP operation, our average injection rate during this 6-month period was like 4,671 gallons per minute. Pipeline was available at 90% of the time. We did have some drilling activity in August and September, which is the reason we're kind of reduced average for that 6-month period. Southeast geyser production and injection, we produced about 17 billion pounds of steam, and we've injected about 10.58 billion pounds of water, roughly about 60% mass replacement. Our seismic activity in the southeast geysers, there were 36 events, magnitude 1.5 and above. There were no events in the southeast geysers, magnitude 3 or above. And then finally, for the entire geysers, we have 464 events, magnitude 1.5 and above. 8 events that were magnitude 3 and above. The highest earthquake event or seismic event was 4.12. So that's a brief summary of what's been going on in the last 6 months in terms of production and seismic activity. Like I mentioned, Craig will be elaborating on a lot of this and probably give you a lot better detail than I have. Is there any questions I can answer? Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Craig, we can put in you.
Okay, yeah. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about, first of all, thanks Ed for your part there. And a lot of the things that Ed talks about ties into what I'm working with here. And so as far as the CGAP water availability, I'm not going to get into that because Ed has already spoken through that. And but I will talk about the SRGRP water and a few other things. But first of all, let me just show you, here's the agenda for today, and I'll try to keep this relatively brief. I'm going to talk about, just show an image of to get everybody in tune with where the communities are relative to the field, status of the seismic monitoring networks, a bit on the Kincaid fire, which happened after the reporting period, but it's important for the seismic monitoring networks throughout. A bit on the yearly water injection, field-wide seismicity analysis, and then some animations that are helping to understand the behavior of seismicity within the geysers. Bit information on the community hotline, and tied in a little bit with the regional geology for some of the fault analysis work and compartmentalization studies I'm doing. And then I'm just going to finish up with just a couple examples of some research projects we're working on. Anyway, first of all, here's the field outline, the productive steam reservoir outline, and you can see the scale at bottom, 25,000 feet on the maximum there. Cobb Mountain inserted, major roads, that's in quotes because that's up for debate sometimes, but Cobb and Anderson Springs, the other communities on the eastern flank of the field, and then some of the main roads are in blue. To orient you. And then I just wanted to show we do have 34 seismic stations, 3 component seismic stations that are part of the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory Network. I'll talk more about that. We do have 2 nanometric stations installed, these state-of-the-art strong motion acceleration devices. We were intending, and I left this as it was, because we were intending to get the 2 additional devices in by the end of the year. The Kincaid fire may set us back a bit on that. We may still make this goal of getting these additional 2 devices in here and here by the end of the year. We have all the permits, we just need 2 good days of weather to get out and do them. And then we'll have a total of 4 strong motion devices on the eastern flank of the field. The ADS-2 station was unreliable. It's still sitting in the community center. That's I'm putting money in the budget for 2020 so we'll have 2 stations in Anderson Springs. Then the USGS has their network. 7 stations contribute to the geysers, essentially seismicity. So anyway, we have the main point to be made here is that the Lawrence Berkeley network and the USGS network are all combined, and that provides us a very nice database to work with. I have very good data from about 1984 on that's been, it's what they call tomographic double difference data. It's refined positioning, and that's been very useful. Now the next thing to mention, just to get a feel for relative size of this granitic intrusion in the communities here. Here's the top of the fell site or the granitic intrusion, and that's dated about 1.1 million years ago this occurred, and most of you know the Cobb Mountain extrusives are similarly dated. The top of the steam contours, you can see the irregularity of this. And the scale over here shows from 0 to 6,000 feet subsea, the structure of the top steam. And then some of the fault systems, these are inactive faults, but they've been defined by the U.S. Geological Survey and are essentially initially bounding faults for the field. I want to talk about the status of the seismic monitoring networks first. The Lawrence Berkeley array, it's fully functional, but we have had some recent concerns and have some solutions related to that. The first thing is seismic sensor failures. We're ending up with some sticking components, and so we purchased 24 new stations or new sensors, and our seismic contractor, Ramsey Haught, has already replaced 14 of these, and our goal is to get these all in by the end of the year. We lost a little time with the Kincaid fire. We had to go back and fix some things, so that may be pushed out just slightly, but we're pretty close to that. So we'll have 24 new state-of-the-art, higher data quality sensors in place soon in total. Other thing, I talked about this before, but the Department of Energy has redirected their funding towards two major projects called Forge and CoLab. And so we are Calpine is taking on a contribution for yearly maintenance and upgrades to the system. You can see the numbers there. And that's being divided amongst quite a few projects that I'll talk about. So we are doing seismic monitoring network improvements that are necessary. There's been some deferred maintenance due to DOE funding over the past years. Ramsey Haught's been primarily responsible for the network installation, maintenance, and upgrades, and he's continuing to work with us, but he's getting near retirement age. He has very specialized skills, and his experience at the geysers is difficult to replace. So I'm working with him right now. The goal is to improve the reliability of the network prior to his eventual retirement. And at that time, we're going to try to take on JARPA Data Solutions, who works with Lawrence Berkeley Labs historically, and then also do a bit of work in the area of getting trained up a bit so some Calpine staff can take on a little bit more of the day-to-day maintenance that's required of the network. So anyway, a lot of things to consider there. And I'll talk about these 15 network upgrades that we're working on with these two contractors on the next slide. The last thing to mention as a concern is and this is, like I said, post the reporting period, but I wanted to talk about a little bit. We've had some sensor station damage, significant power and communication failures from this beginning on October 23rd, and I'll discuss that a bit more. So first of all, the individual components in a lot of our historically installed sensors are sticking, generally the vertical component. Up and down component, some of these what are called 4.5 Hertz phones are sticking. So we're doing upgrades to improve the data quality, the reliability of these devices. So we purchased 24 of these Geospace 3-component sensors, and as I said, 14 are in the field now. About $2,900 per station with installation. And here's a look at one of the stations. We've got a 3-component sensor down here, batteries, GPS unit, radio transmitter, and a digitizer in this Hoffman box. Then we've got a solar panel, a radio antenna that sends the signal to a radio repeater, and there are 4 radio repeaters within the field. Here are a lot of the things that we're working on. Like I said, there's 15 major things that we're working on with our seismic contractors. So I'll just, I think mainly I'd like to just have you focus on just the blue, because we don't need to read through everything. We're upgrading the sensors to what are called 2.5 Hertz Geospace sensors. We're also doing 2 additional strong motion station installations. Everything's ready for those. We just need a couple clear days on that. We're working with Ernie Major and others to determine the optimal downhole seismic sensors, because we have some boreholes up to about 500 feet deep. We want to put sensors in the bottom of some of those because there's a lower noise level in those in a borehole, and so we're working towards getting those in, and there may be about 10 locations we can put those. Battery replacements and recycling of those batteries, we're working with that. We have a bunch of batteries in the warehouse now. When Ramsey Haught comes in, he takes these batteries out and replaces some of the ones in the existing stations. We're going to replace all 76 of them within about the next year. Data security issues, we're working with our seismic contractors to improve server access from outside the field while still maintaining security for a power plant, which is a significant issue. Software upgrades, we've got Jarpa Data Solutions working on some database storage and visualization things so we can better understand the strong motion behavior that's going on within these sensors on the east flank of the field. And a lot of stuff down here, I'm not going to read through all of it, but we have a goal to improve the data quality and the continuity of the data by better tracking the behavior of the individual sensors and the network, better data transfer solutions and storage solutions. We had some problems with noise spikes on some of the sensors. The solution to that was figured out, and those have been all corrected except for, I believe, 2 now. We're doing more work to better back up the systems on this at 2 remote locations. And one thing we're trying to do now is get a little less dependent on Calpine Power and Communications, kind of isolate this network from Calpine a bit more, because sometimes when Calpine facilities go down, we struggle with that a bit with the seismic network as well. And so uninterrupted power supplies are helping along that way, and we're putting those at the Geysers Administration Center. Have already been installed, and these will be in before the end of the year at 3 of our repeater locations. I'm not going to spend any time on this slide except to say that the USGS seismic monitoring network is of significant value to the geysers, and it is fully functional, and the different items that we achieve a lot of benefit from are shown here. They acquire data, they process all the data from the field, transfer it down to Menlo Park, do integration between the LBNL and USGS data. They do some data analysis, distribution, and archival. So this is a valuable thing. So we try to keep a good relationship going with the USGS. And like I said, that system is fully functional. Now the strong motion data network, I'll really quickly talk about this because I hit on this just a little bit. These stations are about $7,300 per unit with installation, and we've got 2 of the new ones in the Cobb area, Anderson Springs. We've got 2 more. You can see how they're almost equally spaced. This one's near Cobb Mountain. This one's in the Ford Flat area. So those will be installed soon. There's one in Ingles property and one, like I said, near Cobb Mountain. And the other 2 were delayed by Kincaid fire issues because we had to have our seismic contractors in the field working on repairs rather than data equipment installation for quite some time. So anyway, the important point here is these are better data accuracy, better reliability. As most of you know, the previous stations, we had a lot of problems with communication and power on those old ethane units, and we're trying to bypass all that. Yeah, so anyway, let's talk about the Kincaid fire for just a moment. The power plants are shown in blue, and a couple of the main facilities, the West Administration Center and the Geysers Administration Center are shown in yellow there for reference. And then all of our well locations, our wellhead locations, are shown as these red dots here, so you can kind of get a feel for the outline of the field here. And then we bring in blue the Lawrence Berkeley seismic stations in the deep blue, and then we bring in a temporary research seismic monitoring network that was put in the north part of the field here. So this is all the stuff I had to be concerned about with the fire, among other things. We've had a lot of things to be concerned with. But here's what happened. Fire came through, and so this is the outline of the fire in its northern portion. And the important things to note here are that we had several of our let me get to the summary here. The summary is that the Kincaid fire significantly impacted the central geysers, our power and communications. Our field-wide water injection and steam production was initially just shut in. That was the first time in anybody's memory, I believe, that the entire field had to be shut in. We had a lot of wells on data loggers to make sure we had data coming in, and that they go out and access those regularly, rather than relying on communication lines for a period of time. So a lot of things happen. Power plant damage on Unit 14, a couple of the cells of the cooling tower. But anyway, getting back to the seismic monitoring network, which is our interest, 3 of the 34 stations for the Lawrence Berkeley network were within the perimeter. So we went out and investigated all these. I went out with the seismic contractor. And then we also had 4 stations close to the Kincaid fire perimeter. And we also had what's called the DX radio repeater right here that was within the fire perimeter. Also, 20 of the 93 CEC-funded seismic stations were within the network, and those are the ones in green there. So once again, the deep blue are the Lawrence Berkeley stations, the green are the CEC-funded stations for our research program. And the conclusions of this are, one of our stations was significantly fire damaged and required repairs. Communications for all stations with data flow through this radio repeater were halted, and we had to actually move the Lawrence Berkeley server up there and put it on the generator and send data out that way for a while. Anyway, we've been bouncing back and forth all through the field trying to keep data flowing, and we also initiate what are called data card swaps at the seismic stations to make sure we don't lose any data long term. Go out and change the cards out, take those back to the facilities and download those so we can insert those in the data flow. So it's been a big deal. I guess that's a good summary. So anyway, one interesting thing, all of our CEC-funded seismic stations survived the fire. Every one of them, they're in yellow plastic cases. We put them in areas where we had good solar exposure, so no trees nearby. And we made a decision to put them on rock outcrops for good solar, for good coupling with the sound. And in the end, the fire burned up to them, but did not damage any of these stations. So for reasons that weren't, by coincidence, I guess is what, we ended up with a very good fire protection program there. I just wanted to quickly mention, this is looking at the south end of the perimeter of the Kincaid fire. And you see that little indentation right there? If you blow that up, it's right there. And I just thought I'd mention, one of the other things that's been keeping me busy, that's where my wife and I live, right there. So we had fire within 18 feet of our house, in our property within 18 feet of the house. So that kind of contributed to a busy couple months too. No damage to the house. And I guess I'll just say, like I've been telling everybody, we are very thankful for the firefighters in this part of the country. They saved our neighborhood and a lot of other ones down through here. Now let's get into the seismicity analysis based on all the networks that we've been discussing. So anyhow, we're looking at the period from April 1st to the end of September, seismic magnitude from 1 to 4.5 shown here. And as you can see, we had several events that were above magnitude 3 this period. Last reporting period was excellent. This one is one that we have to talk about a little bit more about some reasoning behind some of these seismic events. But anyway, we had a 4.12 here, as mentioned by Ed, our most significant event in April. And you can see the numbers here. So we had a total of 36 events greater than 2.5, 8 greater than 3, 2 greater than, 3 greater than 3.5 magnitude, and you can see those right here. So anyway, let's talk about some of what was going on this time. We had kind of a unique period for precipitation, and first I'm going to show a graph that shows these same seismic event magnitudes here. I'm showing it from 1 to 5 on the scale just to align things a little better. And what we can see here is a couple things. Whenever I look at seismic data and I look at the water injection volumes, I try to see if there's any correlations, and that's been done for a lot of years. One thing that can be almost instantly done is see that we had the magnitude 4.12 when we were coming off of an injection peak that was required for some repairs. Now, you might make a case and say, gee, that's really significant, and we need to, and that is a causal situation for that event. But then you look over here at this seismic event, and you see that there's just absolutely nothing going on as far as volumes. What I would like to say is I try to be very careful with not assigning blame to these variations that occurred. But one thing we can for sure say is that we did have an increased seismicity up to approximately magnitude 3 in this period here, where we were injecting more water. I think it is safe to say that by introducing more water into the field and having more variability due to a lot of issues during this last reporting period, that we had more seismic events than we would have anticipated. So we have a shutdown period here. And just to put this in context, let's look at this a little differently. Well, first of all, let's look at these seismic events, their magnitudes here. So you can see 4.12, 4.07, and like I said, I've highlighted all 8 of them with magnitudes greater than 3. Now I'd like to show this. This is the injection volume history for this reporting period. Now if I go back 1 year to the previous reporting, the previous, well, going back 2 reporting periods, so we get the same 6-month interval from April 1st to end of September. What we can see is that the water injection profile is significantly different. We had a lot of precipitation this year, late into the spring and early summer, and that resulted in a lot of extra water coming in from SRGRP, and so that is essentially it was a concern all along with the amount of water we were injecting into the system. Nothing especially significant occurred. Like I said, we can see that these events seeing 3 times, but what I would like to say is that I do feel like this is a very anomalous weather condition we've had this year, and we do anticipate better moving forward. That's all. I guess that's the best way to word it. What I would like to say about that April 15th event is we can see right here the water injection comes down. We've got a high frequency of seismic events here, and that magnitude 4.12 was initiated, all these others right here. We also had quite a lot of seismicity while we were ramping up here at this point. So, it's the kind of things we're watching carefully, and I would like to get back to a comment I've made a lot of times, and that's that the goal for Calpine is to continue to drill water injection wells for better distribution field-wide and try to minimize the variability within these. When a situation like this one happened, where they had to take the water flow down entirely, we tried to do it in steps. You can see how it was done in steps. But even so, there's a certain number of pumps that are available. So we have to go up 1 pump, 2 pumps, 3 pumps, 4 pumps, 5 pumps. That's the alternatives for the water coming in through this system. So we do the best we can with this, and we talk with our contacts about trying to make sure that this is achieved with as little variability as possible. But sometimes that's just not entirely possible because of mechanical issues with systems. Now I'd like to look a little differently at this, and what we're looking at here is daily injection volume, and then the field-wide seismicity account, how many events happen per day for this period. And once again, I've highlighted these, and like I said, you can see in this case, this event seems to be tied in with this extreme variability here, which we're trying to avoid, and I feel there is some relationship there. Some of these other larger events occurred, like this one here, close to where this shoulder was achieved here and on. But then we look at these over here, And those took a little more of a look on an individual well basis. And what we do see is sometimes there's a little variability there, but it is hard to pinpoint things exactly. What I'd like to do now is move on. I'm going to talk about some individual wells later and some things that I'm trying to achieve by looking a little, not at the field-wide level, but more at the well level. But first, I just wanted to show one thing. This is the precipitation for Sonoma County for January 1st through 31st of September. And it was kind of unusual. I guess most of you remember that. So anyway, I just want to put everything in context here, that we did have a lot of water coming into the system because of unusual precipitation conditions in the previous 8 months. Now, let's look at another slide I put together about these water injection volumes. So what we're looking at here, each of these is a month of the year, 1, 2, 3, 4 through 12. And then here's the number of gallons per month that are injected for that month from the SRGRP system. And so we can see for a total of, beginning in 2003 through 2018, through 2018, here are all the numbers. So they're all posted together. If you look at them individually by color, you can kind of position them where they fall. But the important thing is, if you do a 15-year average on this, you get these values that we see here. And so there's been some variability about that 15-year average, and that's understandable because precipitation patterns do vary each year. But now look at this. First we'll look at that curve showing that. But now look at the values we had for this year. We had a significant variation in the water injection monthly volumes that was required by the high precipitation. And so if you look at these, all of these are in excess of the average, and all of these are deficiencies from the average. So a lot of variability in the system during this period. Like I said, this is something we try to avoid. We try to work with our partners on this, but in this case with the precipitation, it was essentially unavoidable. And now one other way of looking at this, probably too many ways possibly, but I flattened that blue line, that 15-year average, to a 0 here, and then you can see that in the early months of the year, January, February, March, April, May, June, we were above the average, and into July even. Each of those months, the monthly volume was above the average, and then after that it came down. So we had a surplus of about 980 million gallons up through the end of July, and then that came down quickly to about 470 million gallons. So a lot of variability introduced by precipitation during this period. Here's another look at this. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this because we talked through this, but I like to just break this out in different ways. During this past reporting period, shown in red, with magnitude 2 and greater, there's been a downward trend. As you can see, these last 2 reporting periods, we've had a bit of an increase from that due to variability in the injection profiles. Magnitude 2.5 also been on a downward trend, and we have a slight increase there. Magnitude 3, we have 8 this time, not above historical averages at all, but a little bit higher than the past few reporting periods. And then magnitude 3.5, an increase from previous periods, but within the bounds we've seen recently. And then magnitude 4, and this is the one that I'm going to keep an eye on very closely, because we did have two events exceeding magnitude 4 during this reporting period. So these are things that I'm analyzing. I'm going to talk about one of those in a minute, or one of that similar to that. Now, let's look at the yearly field-wide steam production, the water injection, and the seismicity. And the points I want to make here are, our steam production profile looks like this. We're nearly at sustainability here. We had a little bit of a downturn. We had a lot of issues in the field, facilities issues, with fire, with a lot of things, so that's down just a little bit from what we'd like to see. But notice that the water injection profile has increased significantly. This is a projection for the last 2 months of the year, but it should be fairly accurate right there. So we're, as Ed talked about mass balance, we're very close to mass balance here now, but we did have a slight, more of an uptick in the water injection profile than we'd like to see. We'd like things to be a little bit more gradual. I'm going to talk about some of these individual magnitude distributions. If you take the water injection profile and scale it, and then look at the magnitude 1.5 and greater events, here's what it looks like. So we had a high back here just after the SRGRP injection started, and we're down from that significantly, but we did have a slight uptick this period in 1.5 and greater seismic events. Magnitude 2 and greater, similar kind of thing, downward trend, but a slight uptick in this period, mainly due to this abrupt change in water injection that we're going to try to that we try to minimize to the degree possible. Magnitude 2.5, exactly the same thing, downward trend, but a little bit of an uptick in the numbers here in the last reporting period. And magnitude 3 and greater, and this is the one I like to show because I think this is encouraging for the geysers overall. When we look at long-term trends for the field, what we can see here is that if you fit a regression line to this from 1987 to the present, you can see that we are on a significant downward pattern for these magnitude 3 and greater seismic events. About half an event per year, about one event every 2 years is another way of looking at that. So anyway, this is an encouraging plot for me. Not to sugarcoat things, what I want to do is also show what we're seeing with the magnitude 4 and greater events, which are being investigated as much as possible, and that is that we did see a significant burst of activity right in this period here, of about 2.5 events per year, and then we since that time we've been on just a little over 1 magnitude 4 and greater event per year, and you can see the water injection profiles from the 4 sources, SCGRP, CGAP, the condensate, SRGRP, and freshwater are shown there with the colors represented. So you can see the variability seasonally there. But one thing, like I said, not to sugarcoat things, but during this last period, we did have 2 magnitude seismic events greater than magnitude 4. And I'm looking at those very closely to see what relationships that has with water injection and the subsurface structure as we know it now. This is more for reference than anything. I'll go through this quickly. The Anderson Springs Ingalls Strong Motion Station recorded these values with strong motion. Important. I don't want to. I don't want to diminish the importance of these. I look at these very carefully because we do want to know what the community is experiencing here. And importantly, we did see back in 26th of April, there was a magnitude 2.54 event that was close to the community. That was our most significant event of the year. And this is something that's been talked about before. It's not just always the magnitude of the event; it's the magnitude and the distance. It's energy and distance. So we got to keep working towards limiting seismicity entirely near the communities. And like I said, our goal with the water distribution and variability is trying to achieve all those things. Now let's look at. Well, let me mention one thing down here. The 4 most significant events appear on the mortality intensity scale here. The perceived shaking is moderate and very light potential for damage. And then this one event here is a bit stronger here, which shows right here. Now let's look at Cobb. Cobb is always a little less sensitive to the seismicity. As most of you know, Anderson Springs, there's some near-surface alluvial deposits that quaternary sediments that amplify the seismic signal or the seismic response in that area. And so anyway, that's Anderson Springs. So the Cobb area doesn't have that issue, and so the resulting peak ground accelerations in the Cobb area are usually significantly lower, and we can once again see that. Of course, another thing is that just to try to word this correctly, we're trying to make sure that we minimize our injection in the Anderson Springs area. And let me talk about it on the next couple slides. So anyway, let's look at the field-wide distribution of seismic events. So first of all, I'll put the fault zones in surrounding the field, and remember these are inactive. And next, I'll bring in, here's the CGEP pipeline, and here's the SRGRP pipeline. And just progressing through these in a 2-week interval, we can see that on April 12th, we had a magnitude 3.08 here. The 15th, we had this event here, 4.12. Moving on to May 22nd, we had a 3.03 over here. Then in the next interval, we had 2 events on the 31st of May, a 3.03, and on the 4th of June, a 3.88 here. And then moving on again on the 11th of June, this 4.07 here. We'll have 2 more coming in, 3.18 up here in the Pratty 9 area. I'm going to talk about that one a little bit. And also a 3.19 right here in the just southwest of the column. So the only good news to mention, or the good news to mention here, is that due to our injection program and the subsurface geology, you can see that we are achieving a goal of moving our water injection and improving our water distribution so that we target more areas up in the northwest part of the field with the water injection and away from the communities over here. Let's move on to the next one. What I'd like to do now is just show another way of looking at this. One thing I like to do sometimes, and this is just probably a little bit getting a little on the edge of too much science here, but I like to take a look at these, isolate like 2-week intervals of water injection and seismicity, and just look at that brief interval and see what happens. Don't build it up over the period. Just look at a brief 2-week interval. So if you bring the water injection in, you can see the monthly injection volumes are shown here. And once again, you can see that we are putting more water into the west side of the field and into the more away from the communities as best we can. And of course down in the Anderson Springs area and over towards Cobb, we've got less water injection going into some of those wells like -13 and some of these down here. What I would like to mention now is I'm just going to step through this at a 2-week interval, and it's kind of nice to just look at, or for me it's kind of interesting to look at the seismicity just over a brief burst of time and how it moves throughout the field at different times. And I think this is sometimes important for understanding our water injection and seismicity relationships. So I'm going to quickly move through this, but the point here is I'm trying to look at this in a lot of different ways to try to understand what's happening with the water injection profiles at each individual well, and then associated seismic events. Are they occurring when the water injection volumes are decreasing, increasing? Any type of patterns we can detect from that. And moving on through the end of September and end of September, and then just moving on to that. Now what I'd like to do here is just quickly animate in and bring in all of the seismic events through the end of September, with the point being here, just to show, I've talked about this previously, but we do have, in this case, seismic events that are color-coded by depth. And so what we can see here is that the events that are in the greens and the yellows and the reds are deeper, especially the reds. And so we have a deep central core of the field where the seismicity is descending to greater depths. And that's important to understand. There's some structural issues that we're trying to make sense out of with all that. And these seismic events and the patterns in there help to understand the subsurface structure. So that's being used to the degree possible. And a quick AA slide on the community hotline. This was a more active 6-month period, just making that very clear and understood by Calpine. And we're also encouraging the community hotline use. And so the end result is we had a total of 29 calls to the Calpine community hotline during the reporting period. And if we look at these, some interesting things. One of them is a magnitude 2.54, and another one is only a magnitude 2.03. But let's look at that. If you isolate the community of Anderson Springs here, and we can see that all 5 calls were from, well, let's start here. We have a total of 4 calls from a magnitude 2.54 event that was about 9,300 feet northwest of Anderson Springs, right here. And then we also had 5 calls from a magnitude 2.03 seismic event that was only about 2,800 feet. So this is important for us to understand with respect to our injection programs. We've got to continue to minimize our water injection in this part of the field, and this is the reason. Yeah, so anyway, I make note here, 9 of these calls concerning 2 relatively low magnitude seismic events with limited epicentral distance. So energy and distance are important for these seismic events. And now let's take a look at another thing. What I wanted to do is show, here's a field view, and then here we're looking directly from the south into the field and into the core of the field. And once again, I just want to kind of give you an idea of the kind of things I'm looking at to try to understand how the water profiles and the seismicity behave. So if you start progressing through these, in this case, I'm looking at just a single day at a time. So we're at the, in this case, the 3rd, the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and here we've got a more significant event up in the Adlin part of the field, and then we move on to the 12th here, and here's an event here that was of significance, and sometimes you can see some patterns related to those that fit the a lot of the subsurface interpretations that have been done to understand the fracture and fault systems, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. But just progressing on through this, this is our one of our most significant events for the reporting period. I mentioned the 15th of April. You can see the distribution of seismic events. This event occurs, and then within the next hour or two, you get all these seismic events related to it that help us understand how the structure of the field. And I'm going to go ahead and move on through this. I just want to kind of give you a feel for some of the things that are being investigated. Of course, the water injection centers of injection are shown as the blue, and all the wells here. Don't want to dwell on that too much, but I just want to kind of give you a feel for it. Now, one thing I'd like to show here, this is a nice example where you can see a very nice alignment just in a single day, and see that all that seismic seems to be along a line pattern, and that is consistent with a fracture surface that's been developed for that part of the field. And now I'm going to show some examples of that kind of thing. I took a look at an event on the 11th of June, and if you look at the time here, I'm going to progress at different time intervals, but I'm going to start out by progressing only a minute at a time. Here's the seismic event that occurs here on the 4.07 on the 11th of June, and then we start adding the seismicity just in the minutes right after the initial event. We get this spike of activity because we disturbed the subsurface to some degree, and it's trying to recover. It changes the stress field in the subsurface slightly. And so we get these seismic events occurring within this limited distribution around that main event. And I'm going to go ahead and progress through to, yeah, that's the end of that. So this is at the end of that same day. So we went through a period of about 18 hours, and there's the patterns from a single day of seismicity related to that event only. And then here's some of the fault and fracture interpretations that I've done for this part of the field. And this uses all the seismicity from 1984 to the present. I slice it, I go through it, I look for patterns in there and try to figure out where alignments, where is the seismicity moving along fracture systems, or where is it confined in compartments? And each of those surfaces you see represent that type of thing. And so the important point I want to make here is that seismic event is perfectly aligned with an existing fracture system that probably extends deeper but wasn't illuminated by seismicity. But anyway, we got that event occurred right along a known fault fracture surface. And then moving a little bit differently into the field and rotating around a little bit, you can see that this plane here is this plane right here that comes down through here, another existing surface. And just a single day of seismicity helps to define that in a little more detail. And then I wanted to talk about this one here, where I've got two interpreted fracture systems. I've got this stretched a little bit so we can see it better on this side. But there's a fracture system coming down here and one coming down here that have been interpreted based on years of data. And the point I want to make is that this fracture surface was interpreted only to here because there wasn't any seismicity to define it any deeper. And this seismic event essentially lit up or illuminated the subsurface to a greater depth and gives us a little better understanding of the model at that point. And of course, like I said, the goal is to understand these seismic events, their behavior, and their relations to the water injection profiles, so there's ongoing work there. This is just kind of for fun. I want to progress through this, but I'll do this fairly quickly. But most of you are familiar with plate tectonics. And so if we start 200 million years ago and look at the configuration of the continents at that time, this is something that they call Pangea, all land, all essentially accumulated or together in one portion on the globe. And then over millions of years, these continental plates began to move, to adjust, and essentially what's happening is the opening of the Atlantic Ocean occurs right here. This is North America here and California out here. So here we're looking at North America, California. And as we begin to open up the Atlantic, of course, the Pacific Ocean is becoming smaller, and that crust has to go somewhere. So it goes beneath the North American plate along this margin here. And I'm not going to try to explain this fully because you could take weeks and months to do this. But the point being here that there's a lot of due to the plate tectonics, due to the movement of these plates, there's a large collision zone along the western margin of the U.S. and subduction occurring there, the oceanic crust descending beneath the North American plate, and right about here, a central ridge begins to move beneath the North American plate, and that changes the motion here. And about 20 million years ago, the San Andreas Fault System was initiated. And so that's where I'm trying to head with this. We've got the initiation of this movement between the North American plate and the Pacific plate. So the North American plate's here, the Pacific plate's here, and they're moving relative to one another along the San Andreas system. And here's a look at almost present day. And now if we look at that along the west coast, here's the San Andreas system. It's the main fault system is here, but there's a whole series of aligned systems of seismicity as we step inward, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit in relation to the geysers because of some of the work that I've been doing. If we take that to a different map type and look at that, we can see the seismicity once again. Of course, this is Alaska up here, western margin of Canada, and then down here, and of course we've got a lot of seismicity on the west coast of the United States. If we zoom in on that, we see it looks like this. The fault systems that have been interpreted or determined by the U.S. Geological Survey are shown in red, these USGS active faults. And the important thing here for the geysers is that I'm using these to better understand the fracture systems within the field. So the USGS uses surface fault mapping techniques, and they use these seismicity patterns to better understand how the plates fit together, how the big picture of the world works. And where I'm trying to go with this is, we're trying to take this down a level and look at the field level of the geysers to understand that a bit better. So if we step in a little closer, the U.S. Geological Survey has determined these major fault systems on the west coast of the United States. And so this is a portion of the San Andreas system here. And they have determined the probabilities of seismic events greater than 6.7 occurring all along these systems. And if we look here, we can see those active systems that have been determined by the U.S. Geological Survey. And then stepping in one more level, here's where I wanted to end up with this. The U.S. Geological Survey faults in the vicinity of the geysers and our communities look like this. We've got a stress that's aligned like this. The regional stresses are pushing like that, and it initiates movement along the San Andreas system along like this. The relative motion is downward or towards the southeast for the North American plate, to the northwest for the Pacific plate. And you can see the motions are about 24 millimeters per year average. And then as we step inward, those rates become less along these adjacent systems. The Macama fault system, which is still to the west of the geysers, and then the Bartlett Springs fault system, which is to the east of the geysers, which exists right about here. And so we have these fault systems in here that we are trying to understand better based on the regional geology. That's the point I'm trying to make here. So if we look at the regional geology, the stresses, and then look in the field, it can help us make sense of that. So very quickly, I've shown this before. If you take the seismicity and slice it at different depth slices, you can begin to interpret alignments on that based on this level and levels above and below. You can start to understand where these fault systems appear to be occurring, where these alignments are occurring. And then what I've got right now, this is where I'm at right about now. I've got 282 surfaces that have been determined within the field that are fault fracture surfaces or structural boundaries of some type. And so those are all interpreted as surfaces within the field. And one interesting thing is to start looking at this and how are they oriented. And getting back to that regional stress issue that I was talking about, we can see that there's a cluster of these events. This is something called a Schmidt diagram. I don't expect everybody to jump in and understand everything about this immediately, but the important thing is this is north, this is west, and a lot of these planes are oriented along about north 35 degrees west, and you can kind of see that orientation within here. And then there's another alignment that exists for a lot of the fault planes that is like this, north to the northeast. To make it simple, northwest oriented, northeast oriented fault system or fracture systems. And so this is an important thing to understand when trying to work with the understanding the seismicity in the field and its behavior. And so I wanted to kind of show this as where things are right now with understanding the major fault fracture systems and structural divides. One important thing is, the more this is broken up, the less likely we are to have a significant seismic event. It takes a large fault area moving adjacent side to side to initiate a significant seismic event. So this gets us even more firmly down the road that we don't think we can have much a seismic event greater than about what we've seen at the field right now because of the limited fracture surface sizes. This is just another way of looking at that. I've just taken an azimuth diagram here, and I think I'm going to go ahead and pass by that. I just want to kind of give you a feel for doing a lot of work to try to understand these fault and fracture systems beneath the field. One comment to make: in the north part of the field, the behavior of these fault systems is different. These are more aligned with the regional stresses to the northeast, to the northwest and northeast, and down near the southeast geysers, the granitic intrusion becomes very near the surface, and it impacts the behavior of the faults in that part of the field. They're more radial going out from the main peak of the granitic intrusion. And just very quickly, I thought I'd show, here's a couple examples of some major fracture systems, or some fault zones that have been interpreted in the subsurface that have been projected to existing, known, inactive faults that have been interpreted by the U.S. Geological Survey. These are inactive faults, but we can take some of these fault planes that have been interpreted based on seismicity alignments, and they project perfectly to the surface here in the ridgeline fault zone, and down here in what's called the magnitude 4 divide. And importantly, this is a main structural divide. South of that, seismicity doesn't extend as deep, and it isn't as high of magnitude. And then some of the higher magnitude, deeper seismic events are in this part of the field here. So this is all part of trying to understand the structural configuration of the field to get back towards seismicity mitigation. Very quickly, I just wanted to show, I'm tying in some things. This is a surface geologic mapping that's been what they call texture map right to the geologic, to the topographic surface. And there's the top fell site below down there. But now we can take a look at a specific contact where the rock type changes right here. And that is along this line here. So that's the top of what's called a serpentinite zone. And then the base of that serpentinite zone is here. And then you can start building the model from that, kind of stitching the surface into the subsurface. And here's what you end up with down here. We've got the surface topography here, and then a couple surfaces that project all the way up into this surface, into known changes in rock type at the surface, which this is the top of the serpentinite and that's the base, so it projects right up there. So anyway, lots of things going on with trying to develop this model more fully to understand the seismicity. Here's a good look at the current status of the 3D model right now. And what I'd like to say here is that we have a lot of lithologic surfaces in the model. They're offset by the known faults. You can see the offsets in there. Here's an example of a surface in here. We've got the top fell site, color-coded by depth. Here's some of those selected fracture surfaces that are within the model. Not all of them, just a few. If you put them all, then it really gets cluttered looking. The surface topography here, the surface mapping done by the U.S. Geological Survey is here. Just want to mention we're using this model for 3D well planning and real-time drilling analysis. Just yesterday we were drilling the GDC 32 well, and I updated the well trajectory, put the lithology on that trajectory, and we looked at some adjacent wells and figured out we wanted to drill about another 150 feet before we put casing in, because we wanted to hit a certain expected lithology or rock type. So it's really helping with that. And then we're also using it for microseismic reservoir volume reservoir analysis, and I'm going to talk just very briefly about that. We need to be done by 11?
11, yeah.
Oh, 11? Okay. Okay. And we need, yeah, okay. How much time will we want after? I can short circuit this just a bit.
Since it's a small meeting, why don't you go ahead and give your report?
Okay, all right, okay. I just want to make sure I take no time. Okay, so this is a look at taking what's called a box set, or extracting a limited volume from the model. You can see the surface topography, all the wells here, the well trajectories with the lithology assigned to them. Just as an example, the green is what's called greenstone. The more pink units are gray wacky units of different types, and then there's chirps and other things in there. But anyway, let's look at one limited volume. And then we've got what's called the top of the main gray wacky, a transition in lithology there shown. The top of the steam reservoir is shown by the contours here, so that helps us better understand our drilling targets, of course. Top of what's called the horn felsic gray wacky, this is an interval right above the top fell site, and the rocks become more brittle and more affected by this hot granitic intrusion in brittle rock below that surface. And then the top of the granitic intrusion itself is shown in red. And then we also interpreted the base steam reservoir, and this is based on seismicity pattern. So we have a pretty good estimate of the depth of the steam reservoir based on the known seismicity behavior. It's not perfect, but it's our best guess at it. With the illumination from all of the water injection and the subsurface behavior, we see the seismic as descend to different depths in different parts of the field. Now I'd like to quickly talk about relating some of my work with the interpreted fracture and fault zones to reservoir flow boundaries. The reservoir modelers use a flow model, and they've determined using these 2,000 foot on the side cells, these different barriers or boundaries within the field where the fluid flow changes across those boundaries. These are at 2,000 foot grid spacing, so they just did the best they could with fitting to the existing, the known behavior of the field. But just an example, this is a boundary, this is a boundary, this is a boundary here. And so I'm going to put some dashed lines over some of those boundaries, and then let's look at some of the behavior of the faults and fractures in relation to those rough boundary estimations using a coarse grid. So here's that coarse grid, and then if we lay down where the structural boundaries are based on the seismicity analysis and different alignments, there's one that fits really nicely. There's another one that fits, and this one is actually higher here, lower here, descending. It's hard to see in this view, but it fits along this alignment here. This one fits here, another here, another here, another here. So these are the actual fracture systems within the subsurface. They're not nice, square, uniform. Everything's kind of chaotic, but this is the way it all seems to fit together in the subsurface. And so there's these wells here have different behavior for steam and fluid flow movement than some of these down here because we have these structural boundaries that are occurring here. And just a look at one more of these cases along this red line here. This one fits very nicely here along here. We got 1, 2, 3 fracture systems, 4. This one is higher here, lower here, and intersects subsurface right in here. Another one. And so this is another case where these interpreted fracture systems define a change in reservoir behavior from the northwest to the southeast. And it's a pretty good fit when you look at it in some detail. And then, well, here's a nice one here. Yeah, this is an interpreted fracture system here, the lines here. There's a very nice boundary and pressure between this side and this side based on the well control we have. So anyway, the important point is just trying to fit the picture together here. And in this case, I want to show this particular fracture and show why it was picked. You know, I show all these. Why are they in the model? Why are they important? So let's look at this grayish one here. That's this one right here now. I'm going to rotate that around a little bit, and you can see the seismicity is very well defined on this side. Very high seismic event density, very low over here. And that gives us confidence that there's some sort of reservoir compartmentalization going on, more permeable here than over here, change in rock type. You can also see that same boundary right here, that fracture system goes, or that interpreted fault goes right through there. So you can see high seismic event density to almost nothing there. So that's what I'm trying to use to interpret this. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because we're talking about an area of Pratty 9 right here, this injector. And there was a relatively high seismic, high magnitude seismic event that occurred right in here. And I've been trying to look at this specific compartment in some detail. So I'm going to really cruise through these slides here because we want to finish up. But you can see that these fracture surfaces bound this seismicity very well. And let's look at a couple of those. Stepping in here, we've got this one here to the that's oriented from southwest to northeast. You can see the changes in seismic event density across that when you're looking from, in this view here, towards the northeast right there. So very well defined there. Also here we can see a transition from high seismic event density to low here based on an orientation like this at a different depth, 7,000 to 9,000 feet subsea. And then we add another fracture system up here. And I'm going to step up to that in just a minute. Right here. This one here is the one of most importance for some work I've been doing lately. This defines the southeastern boundary of what I believe is a reservoir compartment here. And if you look at that from viewing it from this towards the northeast, you can see the change in seismic event density once again. So what I'm trying to say here is that there's a lot of work going on to try to understand why some of these higher magnitude seismic events are happening. In this case, a magnitude 3.18, fairly large event, occurred right here, or looking at it more closely in a zoom view, very near this interpreted fracture surface. So I'm trying to work to understand the injection volumes, the history of the injection and its relationship to the progression of seismicity and what maybe initiated that event. So that's one of the things that's mainly being worked on right now. Now quickly, I want to say one thing about last time we got together, I talked about an injection program that we were planning. The point being, we had a well here called 87G21, and it was injecting a significant amount of water into this part of the field. And at a previous meeting, I mentioned to you that we were seeing a lot of magnitude 3.5 plus seismicity progressing towards the southeast and towards Anderson Springs down here. So in the planning phase for a future injection program here, we decided we were going to convert 2 steam production wells to injection wells. And that has been completed now, so let me just step into here. We had 87G21, which was an existing injection well, and that was providing some seismicity concerns. And so it's about 14,000 feet from Anderson Springs. And now we added a well, 74F21, we converted a well to injection, and that just completed. We have to bring a full-size rig on. We have to recomplete that well. It's a big job to do this, but we added that injection well here. We also added 87E21, another one down here, and we're doing. We did a lot of analysis on how we're going to modify the injection with all these wells here. So the main point here is instead of one well primarily providing a lot of injection, causing a lot of seismicity that was progressing to the southeast, we're trying to do a better job with this combination of 5 wells, including 2 recently added injectors, to minimize seismicity, more broadly distributed and limit the variability to the degree possible in this part of the field. And then the only thing I have left here, I'm going to just bring all this in because we need to finish up here. But what I'd like to say about this is we have a research project, California Energy Commission funded project. We got a total of almost $1.7 million. We put seismic sensors in this part of the field. We put 93 of them in. They're all shown in this map here. They're a little difficult to see in this display. But anyway, those sensors look like this, each one of those, 93 of them in the field. We tried to put them in a kind of a grid spacing out in the north part of the field. But they've been acquiring data for about 15 months now. Remember I told you they didn't burn up during the fire? That's why they're sitting on these rock outcrops out there. So that was really a fortunate thing. We helped, Calpine helped a lot with determining the location and access routes for these stations. And there's just an example going out with the GPS units and stuff. The important thing right now, the last 2 things I want to real quickly show, are that there's a conference going on right now called the AGU, American Geophysical Union, and there's 2 presentations being given at that conference using the data that we've been collecting. Calpine contributed the site, our structural model, all the information we can technically, and we're working with a group of very bright scientists to try to understand the behavior of seismicity and progression of seismicity in the North Geysers with much closer sensors of a new design. And so that's where I'm going to stop there. And if there are any questions, I'll be glad to take them.
Thanks, Craig. Any questions?
I have just a quick question.
Yeah.
When we met at the last meeting, there was some talk about another unit being put into Anderson Springs.
Yeah.
Is that going to happen or not, or?
Yeah, I really briefly touched on that, and probably not well enough.
know.
I just spoke to it. What we have for next year, we have a significant budget for upgrades to the
Right.
seismic monitoring system. And I'm going to utilize a part of that budget to purchase another nanometrics Titan accelerometer that we can put in that part of the field.
Do you know
And then
where
we
you're
have to
gonna put
work-
it?
What's that?
Do you know where you're going to put it?
We'd like to work with the community on figuring out whether we put it back exactly in that community park or.
I thought you guys had some problems with it being at the community park.
We may have to install another repeater site, but we're gonna work with the community to make sure we get that in a location that's suitable for everyone. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, we can even talk about it after.
No,
this
that's
meeting.
okay,
Yeah.
no, that's fine.
Yeah, yep, so the short answer is yes, we are gonna replace that station by putting one there or nearby. Yeah, to get the same seismic response.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll move right along. DOGGR could not make it today, so we're going down to US Geothermal. Is Scott Nichols here? The Anderson Springs Community Service District, Rose, do you have anything to contribute?
Sure. I just wanted to say I'm really encouraged about the number of phone calls. I think the last meeting, there was one,
That's about right.
and now there has been 29. I just wanted to say that there's been a lot of talk on social media, Facebook. So when we feel an earthquake, everybody wants to actually talk to someone. And so they get out there and there's a lot of buzz right afterwards, and we try to, Jackie and I try to get on and say, call, make that call, don't just talk about it here. So I'm encouraged that people are calling in when they do feel an earthquake. And I think a lot of people, because it's just a recording, they actually want to talk about it. They're excited. You get this excitement when you feel the earthquake. So you want to talk to your neighbors. But we have been trying to encourage that. I think it's really important. I don't know if you want me to monitor maybe what's being.
Let me just mention one thing. The one thing directly related to this is that whenever someone calls in, if they request a call back, we
Right.
always do that.
Right.
And that was either Danielle or Bruce Carlson,
Yes.
I, or some other combination, depending on the needs.
No, Dave.
Yeah, I actually
And
have
we're
gotten a
transitioning
call
now.
back from you when I called in. I think I was the one last recording. I think I was the one person, I think you did call.
The one thing, when you encourage people to call though, have them indicate if they want to call back or not.
Okay.
Because if they
Yes.
don't say they don't want to call back, then I have to bother them and say, I'm sorry, did you want to call back?
Okay.
Just to cover our bases. But Craig has some magnet handouts.
That would be
Yeah,
awesome,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, well,
okay.
tell you what, since you mentioned that, I'll put these on the table over there now, and if anybody wants to grab one, they can. And if there are any other questions, of course.
I told everyone to just put the phone number into their contacts. Earthquake, here's the number, just call it.
Well, and it's not just earthquakes, it's anything, any kind of geyser-related question.
Okay,
We
okay.
welcome calls.
Yes, it's a hotline for,
Yeah.
okay.
I'm
Awesome,
going to
thank
Ben
you.
Murphy, Cawberry.
Well, like Rose was saying, there's always a lot of buzz after an earthquake. And we go to the coffee shop, everyone's always talking, oh, did you feel that earthquake last night, or whatever the case is. And, for the most part, everybody, it's just what we deal with every day. So, we've had a few water leaks due to it, because we have concrete pipe. But other than that, we're doing good up there.
Linda Darms couldn't make it today, Jacqueline Harper couldn't make it today, Robert Stark couldn't make it today. So that brings us down to general public input. Is there anybody from the public? Hearing none, we'll move on. Now, we rescheduled this meeting because of the Kincaid fire and damage and other reasons, and it did throw some people off. But we need to talk about scheduling for the upcoming year. We've always scheduled it for the Monday every 6 months. I think it's the first Monday of May and November. November is always a holiday for some people. It's Veterans Day. Can we just discuss the possibility of moving this to another day? Craig, your report and Ed would probably take precedence, so let us know if those dates are not going to work for you. But what's your feelings on moving the day so that we're not rescheduling and it causes a little confusion and we lose people here and there?
Well, are you talking about accelerating the date to an earlier time? Or
No, just instead of say the first Monday, maybe it'd be the first Wednesday of every 6 months. Still every 6 months, we're not going to meet more often, but not beyond that.
Yeah, any one of those days that we can accommodate, that isn't a problem. The next one should for May 18th, Monday.
Right.
May 18th.
What about you, Craig?
I'm fine. As you may know, at Calpine, we work 4 long days, 14 plus. And so Fridays are not great, but everything else is fine.
Yeah, it's the same for us. I mean, any of the days, Monday through Thursday, any one of those days during that week would be fine.
Is there anybody here that Wednesday would not work? Say,
Wednesday sounds just a bit cheap.
okay, would the second Wednesday of the month be best? That way anybody that's tied up with the new months, maybe.
And I think that's the CSD's meeting.
Wednesdays are really,
Wednesdays.
Yeah, Wednesdays are hard.
the second Wednesday's my main meeting.
At 10.
So
What about Thursday?
Thursdays are Thursday.
Thursday? So what if we say the second Thursday of every month? And in May, that would be, yeah, it would be May 14th.
On May 14th.
Okay, there's nothing else, we can go ahead and adjourn. Thank
Jan,
you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Since I usually now as the public attend these, is there any reason that the board, your board, doesn't come like they used to? I mean, there are certain people here today, but is there, I forget bylaws and all that stuff, but are you allowed to miss the meetings, or what's going on there? It's a whole different feel to me.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, the Board of Supervisors are so busy with trying to collect funds, trying to take care of other things. They've been, yesterday, the 2 people needed to be at a meeting, they had to conquer and divide, and you take this one, and I'll take that one. I can't speak for them, but I do know that they're going in every direction possible, and it's probably more activity than I've ever seen with Board of Supervisors. But as long as I've been involved, they didn't come often. I know when I came with Mark Dellinger over 3 years ago, 4 years ago, the board wasn't here. I don't think, they've always gotten a report. The whole board gets Craig's report and all of the.
And I mean your actual members on this board.
Oh, this
This
board.
board, I mean,
No.
I understand the supervisors. is a-
Oh, I thought you were talking,
No,
okay, never mind. So,
I mean, because
this
I
board,
think
yeah.
that information is valuable.
Yeah, and this board, the reason, today, it's very skimpy, but we did change it last minute.
Mhm.
Well, not last minute,
Right.
but just any change, because everybody puts it in. So this one, I'm not too concerned. It's, a lot of people didn't, but it was one of them had a medical issue in San
Right.
Francisco, blah, blah, blah. So, but typically, I think we'll get back on track. After the changeover and a lot of new people, there was a little period of, let's say, chaos, but I think it's going to settle down, and coming into 2020, we're going to see it smooth out, and I believe we'll have good attendance.
I'd like to jump in there if it's okay. I think we've got a tag here for Dr. Kurt Nieheim. Yeah. Anyway, I just want to mention that, as you know, Ernie Major was our longtime contact and provided guidance for seismic monitoring at the geysers. he has stepped out of the picture of that role, and he's working more with this Forge initiative, a project that's going on in Milford, Utah, among other things. So Kurt Nehide essentially took his place. And within the past 2 months, Kurt Nehide took a job at Chevron. So anyway, we have a new interim head of the group by the name of Seiji Nakawa, but his background is not really suitable for this meeting. So we're going to try to get something initiated with LBNL again to provide a little more guidance. As far as the USGS, Lynn G., who's the head of that group, who took David Oppenheimer's slot, essentially, she is absolutely working with limited funds and entirely directed towards the earthquake early warning system. So she's just doesn't have the time for this right now, doesn't have the resources for it. So I thought I'd mention those two things. And of course, we always have had Joe Austin here with Auger that was providing a lot of good guidance. And I still talk to him after the meetings and he gives me some tips on things. But anyway, and the last thing I want to mention is to Ben, you mentioned some comments about Cobb and the seismicity. We are doing a little bit of work over in that area again, looking around that part of the field. You may remember -13, or if you don't know from a previous meeting, I've talked about the role of -13 in that part of the field. We saw it having the potential for seismicity to progress towards the communities to the northeast, and we did minimize injection on that particular well to, I think we're at 325 gallons per minute now instead of higher numbers. So when we see things like that over in that part of the field, we're trying to react to it, but we can always do better. Yeah.
It's an everyday part of life for me.
What's that?
I'm used to it.
Yeah.
I don't even, there's another one. So-
Yeah.
Jan, I have one quick follow-up comment to Joan's comments. I'd like to continue to work with you to take a look at the appointments on this, because I'm a little confused. It's Cobb representatives, but they can come from Cobb Water District versus is it a community member? And, so I'm kind of just trying to understand who's appointed and who isn't. That's why there isn't a CSD tag, because I don't see a board resolution appointing someone from the CSD once Muriel stepped away. So but between now and the next meeting, maybe we can tighten that up a little bit.
And I'd like to say one thing too. I told Danielle before the meeting, I should have been more clear with her about Kurt Nehide not being here, but it was buried in an email, like 15 things, and oh, by the way, Kurt Nehide. And so we had to talk about that before the meeting, but that was something I should have done a better job with.
And then also, we only meet twice a year, and like I said, last year, we've seen more retirements, and we have more coming, and the names are changing, the faces are changing, and I was negligent to get Rose's appointment to the board, but I can get that done rather quickly. But I also need to wait to see, are there any other changes that I can do it all at once?
Well, maybe because some of the folks that aren't able to attend, maybe they've been doing it for quite a while, maybe they're ready to step back. So, yeah, I agree, probably should streamline it.
Well, I know of 3 of them that aren't here today, they really regret it. They sent emails, they let me know, this is not, they're just blowing it off. And Amar was one. And
Robert's took a job in Paradise, so he's at work. He can't drive to Paradise all the way here. So he was I was talking to him this morning. He was sorry that he couldn't make it, but they do have a lot of work going on in Paradise right now.
So I think it's going to settle in moving forward. I think 2020 is going to be better. It's been a ongoing transition, it seems like, for over a year. So. Anything else?
Yeah.
Sure. Yes,
Can I make an announcement?
sure.
This Saturday at 9 a.m. at the cemetery, we are having Wreath Over America, and that's honoring our veterans. It's the first time that it's been done, and it's going to be, it's a student that is doing community service that's put all of this together, and his name is Blake Schuster. So Moak is going to do the ceremony, and after the ceremony, then everybody that's there can help put the wreaths on the veterans' graves. So come if you can.
What time?
9 in the morning. Thank you.
I just heard it announced yesterday, I didn't verify it, but that Lake County has more veterans than any other county in California. I didn't verify that, somebody just announced it at another meeting, but I wouldn't doubt it if you drove across, so that's neat. If there's nothing else, do you have a motion to adjourn?